What's the biggest threat to YouTube's business over the next, let's say, 3 to 5 years? Hey everyone, I'm Kevin Wei. I'm a product manager at IBM Data and AI. Today we have a mock PM interview with Matt Suskind. Before we jump into today's question, Matt, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I'm a former Google Associate Product Manager, spent a lot of time on the other side of the interviewing table, and now I'm a coach for Exponent.
Awesome. Well, we're super excited to have you here. And today we're doing a product strategy and a little bit of execution type question. So for this question, Matt, what's the biggest threat to YouTube's business over the next, let's say, 3 to 5 years?
So just to break down the way that I'm going to go through this, the way I'll structure my answer is first, I just want to talk about YouTube as a business. You know, what's important there? What do we need to know about YouTube in order to talk about the threats that they would be facing? Then I want to dive into what some of those threats would be, both from the broader landscape and also, especially from their competitors. And then, once I've explained that, I want to go through and prioritize which I think is going to be the biggest, based on that understanding of YouTube that we laid out and what I know about their threats and their landscape. How does that sound?
Sounds good.
Okay, great. So to start out, I just want to talk about YouTube's business. They have a couple different lines of revenue, but the main one is advertising. That's where they make most of their money. And most of their users are free. And so I kind of want to dive into that a little bit deeper. The way that business works is basically users come to the platform to watch content that's created by creators. And then advertisers are monetizing on those views, right? They're inserting ads for whatever products based on the relationship between the users and the creators. And so, I think that's kind of the fundamental set of relationships at the core of what drives YouTube's business is that the users come for the content. The content creators are there because they can get the views and allows them to either build an audience or to make money off of it. And then the advertisers are there because then they can advertise to those users. I think that anything that's going to be a major threat to YouTube, right, it's going to threaten that major revenue stream, is in some way going to threaten this relationship between the three in some way. I think some of the biggest strengths that YouTube has, just to put these out there so I can reference them later, it's the name in video hosting and video platforms, right? It's sort of the biggest site on the internet for video. If I'm going to post a video, if I'm going to share a video, if I'm going to look for a video, I'm going to go to YouTube. And so that name brand, that recognition, that positioning is really important, and it's a big lever that continues to be an advantage for them. Obviously, it's really easy to post a YouTube video. It's a well-known place where creators can make a lot of money, and so that attracts creators to try and put their videos there as well. And it's got the strength of Google behind it. So when it comes to advertisers, one, Google already has really strong relations with a lot of these advertisers, and two, it allows them to be a lot more intelligent in the way that they connect advertisers to users and content. So, after, this understanding of YouTube and their business, I want to start talking a little bit more about, the actual threats that we see out there. How does that sound?
Yeah, these strengths sound good. So let's move on to that.
Okay, great. So obviously there are going to be major threats for the competitors, and I do want to get into that. But just before I dive in there, I do want to talk about some of the other threats that might exist. For YouTube, because they're such a large company, they have global scale, and so things that happen on a global level can impact their business. So the regulations that different countries put out can have an impact on them. I'm thinking of things like GDPR, right? There are data concerns that will affect their ability to help advertisers target, or to collect data on users, which would help them monetize off of them. It may have concerns for content, basically larger political regulations like that might affect their business. Or if a country like China decides to block them out, that's a huge market that they don't have access to. So I'll put that as one category, as political and regulatory. I think that there are also some social concerns. Certainly people are talking about the effects that social media and content have had on democracy and on discourse. And, a lot of that has focused on Facebook, but there have definitely been concerns about that from YouTube's side as well, like kind of dragging people into, alt-right rabbit holes and things like that. And so I think that there's a chance for social backlash against YouTube for that, people deciding to boycott or, not want to use it. It could impact advertisers because they don't want to be associated with those kinds of videos. There's content moderation issues around comments. There's concern around YouTube Kids and things like that. And so I'd say that there's a whole section of concerns that would be related to whether or not people would want to boycott the platform, whether from the user side or from the advertiser side. And then, from the creator side, those kinds of issues would be more around, whether or not they're being censored or deprioritized by the algorithm, and whether that drives them to other platforms. All that being said, I think that there are more specific threats that come from their actual competitive field. And if we look at YouTube as a whole, they are in so many different verticals that you could build a long list of competitors. They're in education, so you might say Coursera. There are cooking videos, and so you might say things like Bon Appetit or New York Times Cooking, things like that. But I would say to their core business, there's a pretty clear set of competitors that are in very much that video space that are probably going to be their most important threats. And so, in the arena of video hosting, video platforms, sort of on the same level of YouTube, is Vimeo. I would say as you get into shorter form content, more on the social side, there's Instagram and TikTok. And then as you look higher up, sort of the level of production value going up, you get into that premium content that Netflix, Amazon, and companies like that have. I think just to dive into YouTube's position within this field a little bit, because I think that'll be useful to understand, YouTube kind of sits in the middle of a value chain here. If we look at sort of the cost to produce content, the quality of content, certainly YouTube has a huge range, but their bread and butter seems to be sort of in the middle. It's not super short form. It's not as short as a TikTok video, or it's not as short as you might see on Instagram. Maybe more in that like 10 minutes to 30 minutes range. It does have, fairly high production value. You do have to put money in to make something high quality on YouTube these days. And then, up above where you're spending a lot more money on content for premium Hollywood content is where you have like the Netflixes and Amazons. And so YouTube is kind of squeezed in the middle here. And I would say that, to understand what's going to be the biggest threat, we need to understand, where should YouTube be making money? Where could one of these move into YouTube's space? And then how is that going to affect the kind of money that YouTube makes? So just to start diving into this prioritization, I want to bring back up that triangle that I started with, the users, the creators, and the advertisers. Because I think the thing that's going to make something a big threat to YouTube, as I mentioned, is something that affects that relationship in some way, right? What is going to pull our users away and bring them onto other platforms? What is going to drive our creators to other platforms? Or what might make it harder or make it unappealing for our advertisers to be here? Honestly, I think the advertisers are probably the easiest out of this triangle because they just want to be wherever they're going to have eyeballs. And so as long as we're making sure that we have users, our advertisers will come along. And so I think I'm probably not going to be as worried about them within this prioritization. But when I think about these users and creators, from the Netflix and Amazon perspective, they're not really going to be stealing our creators. It's a different art form, right? The kind of content that you get, the vlogs or web series and things like that, don't really translate to that Hollywood world quite as much. Sure, some people break through, but they're not really going to see our creators. But they might be taking our users just in terms of the fact that people only have so much time to spend in a day. And so if you're spending that time watching Netflix shows, you're not watching YouTube content. And so because that content is so high quality, they are known for having a lot of great content, that would be a threat that we want to consider. When I look at the lower quality end of the spectrum, the Instagrams and the TikToks, I start to get more concerned for YouTube because I think that they might hit us in two ways. One, as we think about, the younger generation that for a long time YouTube had a really strong hold on, now we do see a lot of them, being more interested in TikTok and Instagram, right? These are really social platforms. There's a lot more conversation happening there. And I think in certain ways they are capturing the minds of the younger generations. So they could be stealing our users. And then if we consider the creator side, they have really lowered barriers that at one point YouTube was really the easiest place to be creating, and now they've lowered barriers for creators even further, right? YouTube made it really easy to distribute, so a lot of people flock to the platform, but now it's becoming even easier to get an audience on places like TikTok and Instagram. And so, if what these creators care about is building an audience, being able to monetize, being able to grow their reach, I think that these platforms really have an advantage. I'm especially thinking, from the case of TikTok, they make it so easy to create a video, right? It's on your phone. Their editing tools are super simple. They're so easy that 16-year-olds make, pretty good videos on TikTok. And so I think that they definitely have a wedge that they could drive at YouTube, where they can really start to pull in these creators and say, hey, for less investment, you're going to get bigger reach, and you're going to have a bigger, you'll just end up with a bigger audience for your efforts. And I think that's a really, really strong appeal to creators. So all of that being said, I am debating between TikTok and Instagram. And even though TikTok has their great creator tools, I am still going to say that I think Instagram is the bigger threat, mainly because they are in a similar space to TikTok. They recently created Reels, which is, supposed to be their TikTok competitor. From playing around with it, it's not quite as good as TikTok yet, that's for sure. But they do have the force of Facebook behind them. Facebook obviously has these really strong relationships with advertisers as well. It very much ties into their business model to, continue to steal these users and creators from YouTube. And even though, it's not quite the same kind of video platform, I think the social aspect of it makes it so easy to get reach, makes it so easy for users to bring in other users that in a lot of ways, it makes a lot of sense to be a creator on a platform like this.
Do you think creators care more about reaching their viewers, or do you think some creators would care more about finding the platform that is helping them monetize?
Yeah, that's a good question. I definitely generalize the two of them together there, but there are different reasons that creators create. So, some do it because they want to be influencers, right? They want to be a big name. They want to get sort of like this newer version of being a celebrity. And that's all about reach, really. And you can turn that into money in certain ways, but I think for them, the motivation is that reach. Then there are people who are either they are part of businesses, or they are just somebody who is more motivated by the money. In which case, they're trying to find ways to monetize. And I would bet that for now, YouTube is the better place to monetize. I think with that longer form content, you kind of make an argument that you have more of the user's attention. You can put more ads in. It's probably easier to do sponsored deals or at least make more money off of them. And so I think for now, if you have an audience already, then YouTube is a great place to be. But I think that if you're an up and coming person, whether you're interested in that reach or in monetization, Instagram is going to make a really strong case for why you should be on their platform.
Okay, so to summarize, it sounds like the hypothesis or the argument you're making is that for younger users, the biggest threat would then be Instagram. It's a lower barrier tool to create content, and we're seeing much more engagement there rather than if these up and coming creators are creating on YouTube. So there's this threat where they might be more attracted to Instagram.
Right. That's from the creator side. And then from the user side, I think just the social aspect of it, the fact that, Instagram is much more of a social platform. I can open it up, start looking through pictures. My influencers come up. I can discover new people there. People are sending me posts. It seems like things have an easier time going viral more quickly on Instagram. And that's going to lead to more engagement. That's going to lead to users spending more time on Instagram versus YouTube, where, you either have to be in a mode where you want to watch long videos and find these kinds of things, or somebody has to send you a video, which is usually off platform. So there's a little bit of an extra step. There's some action at a distance there.
Okay, interesting. So let's assume that you are a PM at YouTube. How would you mitigate this threat?
And I think to start with managing this, I do just want to reiterate some of the advantages that I see Instagram having. The ways that they actually become a threat to YouTube, because I think we're going to have to mitigate those specifically in order to actually deal with this threat. And then I'll talk about some of the ways that we might do that. So the kinds of things that I've been talking about here are the social aspect of Instagram. Obviously, that's a core function, that it's a social network. There's the appeal to younger generations. I think that comes from both the other users who are on the site, the kind of content that gets promoted, the way the product has been designed to allow for really quick engagement. And then I think the other major theme in my answer here has been that they have an advantage in the easier creation, right? Because that content is shorter, because the expectations for production value are lower, there's a lower barrier to entry. So it's easier to be creating content for Instagram. And all of these obviously are concerns that YouTube would have. And now the question becomes, how do we deal with that as YouTube? And I think fundamentally, YouTube, the product it is today, isn't quite set up to deal with that, right? To make YouTube a really socially, a social first product would require massive changes to the product, and all of that is possible. But there still are a lot of advantages that YouTube has, and things it does well that you might lose by going down that route and kind of throwing everything out. So I would say that it might make sense to come up with either an auxiliary product, something, a new product that's more in the vein of these quicker videos, or to go out and acquire a company that's already growing in that space. Obviously there's a huge bidding war for TikTok right now, and it might make sense for Google to enter that fray, right? Because again, it shores up that lower quality space that YouTube has kind of been more and more pushed out of. So that could be an option for how we deal with it. But if we were going to design a product, build something in this space, I would say that the thing that we want to aim for is how can we get creators onto the platform with as little effort needed to create for it as possible, right? Again, TikTok's creator tools are such a big deal for them because now a 16-year-old goes out, shoots some video on their phone, and now they can just edit it directly there. And so I don't want to say that YouTube should copy that, but they should take inspiration from that, right? What is the kind of content that these kinds of users want to create? You know, and then how can we make that more social? I think that a lot of users in this space, they kind of just want to share their experience, right? And so maybe if we can come up with a product that makes it really easy to, I pause because I think I'm about to describe Snapchat. Something that makes it really easy to just share what you're up to create great content out of that. And then, kind of create social moments around, that experience that you're having. And as I was saying that, I was realizing that's a lot of what Snapchat did well. It's not quite as popular now, I think, because it was so isolated and it was more about, either you're posting to a story or just communicating one-to-one. But if you could have something that built in the advantages of a social network, right? You're posting to a more permanent place, but you're still showing off, hey, here's what I'm up to. You allow people to really easily edit that together, and then share that out. I think that would both appeal to younger users, it would make it a lot more social, and it would help people create content really quickly for it.
So you've mentioned that to mitigate this threat, we have to either do one of three things. We have to address the social aspect, the appeal to Gen Z, or this making it easier to edit, perhaps some sort of mobile editing way to lower the barrier of entry to creating content. So if you were the PM, which one would you choose to prioritize?
Sure. Just to be complete here, I do want to say, I think in the best case, you find a way to do all three, right? They're not independent of each other, and they can all support each other if you have the right product. That being said, to answer your question, I would say that probably the biggest thing would be making it easy to create for these platforms, right? Because the thing I keep coming back to here is that YouTube is kind of getting squeezed out of this cheaper, easier to produce content. It's losing out on a lot of creators who can't produce for YouTube. And so I think that's going to be, the fundamental gap that YouTube wants to fill. And I think if you do that, that will appeal to a lot of the younger creators and their younger fans in Gen Z. And then the social aspects of it, people will talk about videos. They already talk about YouTube videos as well. You can build in features to make it more easily social. But I think the core of it really is going to be that ease of creation and being able to grow a lot of content because of it.
Yeah, I don't totally agree with that. So yeah, because if you think about YouTube, we know that they have tried having some sort of feed, like the social aspect of Instagram. It didn't work too well. They're still having it. It kind of turned more into like a forum. And this appeal to a younger generation. There is YouTube for kids, so maybe there's some potential there. To circle back with the advantage and easier creation, I would say that is what I would prioritize as well. So let's sort of black box the solution or the some sort of tool that we would make. Assuming that this tool was made, what are some of the success metrics that you would take a look at to figure out if YouTube actually is, after coming out with this new product or this new tool, what are the metrics to show that, as the PM, yes, we are making it easier for creators to create?
So as you asked, if we have this solution and we're going to measure that we're doing a good job making it easier to create videos, how would we go about measuring that? I think for this product overall, there are lots of other things that we'd want to measure as well, just to make sure the product as a whole is healthy. But I do agree that most important goal is making it easier to create. And so I'm going to focus my metrics in that direction for this discussion. Is that okay?
That's okay. Yep.
Okay, great. So here we're already starting with a relatively clear goal, right? We are trying to make it easy for people to create content. We're thinking of sort of this shorter form, less lower production value content. And so, yeah, I think that's actually succinct enough as a goal already. We're just trying to make it easier for them to create this kind of content. I want to talk about what that looks like. Before I go into the specific metrics, I want to talk through what are the things we expect to see, what's true in this world if we're achieving that goal, because I think that'll help me understand what are the metrics that tell us that that's actually happening. And so the kinds of actions, the kinds of things that I expect users to be doing, one is to be, I would expect there to be a lot of videos on the platform, right? If we've done a good job making it easy to create, there's going to be an explosion of content. I think that we're going to find that people create content regularly because it's easy, right? If you create one video and it's super hard, you're just not going to create more unless it's really, really worth it. So if we've actually lowered that barrier, we're going to see that more creators create more content regularly, and we'll see more creators getting into that space. I think we're also going to see that with our inbuilt tools, they're just not going to spend as much time editing. Certainly there are going to be some people who push it to the limits, but for the most part, a big sign of our success is that somebody's going to be able to take video and, within 20 seconds, they have something that's, pretty decent, especially, for content that's maybe only going to be 30 seconds to a minute long. So to reiterate those actions, those markers that I'm talking about, it would be lots of videos. It would be a broad set of users who are creating regularly. And then it's going to be, quick editing time. So the specific metrics that we'd be looking at there, I think they fall out pretty neatly. So starting with that first one, that would just be, number of videos. We would want to see, depending over the time frame that we're looking at or how exactly we want to measure this, but we'd be looking at something like the growth in the number of videos. And I think that'll be a pretty clear measure of, how easy it is to create, because the easier it is, the more videos we're going to have.
So when you say growth of new videos, are you comparing this to another old metric that we had?
Well, in this case, I was talking about a new product, and so there won't really be, existing data from that. We obviously have YouTube as a whole, which is a huge platform. So there's not really going to be an apples to apples comparison, but I would say that we would just like to see, that we have lots of new videos coming onto the platform every day. I don't know that there's a great previous comparison just because YouTube is such a different animal and it's already a huge source of videos. But it might be that, we want to see a growth that's trending towards the number of new videos, especially because they're short, being greater than the number of videos that YouTube is having posted daily.
Yeah, that makes sense.
The second one that I was talking about, a broad set of creators creating regularly, there's a couple different metrics that fall out of that. I think we would want to look at, some sort of number of active creators, like how many creators have posted a new video in, say, the past week. If this is short form content and we expect them to be posting pretty regularly, that seems like a reasonable length of time that we would consider that we want people to be actively posting. We might look at how many retained creators we have, how many or what percentage of creators post another video within like the first week after their creation, their initial video. So I was talking about a broad set of videos by a broad set of creators. And so, seeing that retention in terms of posting, seeing how many active creators we have, I think those are going to be, those are the two big metrics there in my mind.
Okay. And the last one you said was less time spent editing.
Yeah.
This sounds like it's a little bit harder to measure. I'd love to hear any thoughts that you would have on measuring this.
Yeah, I mean, the really straightforward way that, might miss out on some nuance is just, from the moment they click like edit to the moment that they click post for a particular set, for a particular video. I imagine we'll have drafts and things, but that amount of time they spend from when they decide to start putting clips together to when they feel that they've edited it and feel good about, what that product is and post it, we would want that to be as short as possible, for uh, for the general case. Obviously some people will spend more time editing to get higher quality content. We don't want to incentivize super quick editing because we don't want everything to come out as trash. And so, we might put some guardrails on that around, maybe we're only looking at like the top, 80% of quality or something like that if we wanted to make it more complicated. But I think the core of it is going to be just what is that time between I press the edit button and I post the finished version of this project I'm working on.
Got it. Cool. That makes sense. Thanks, Matt. So that's the question, and thanks for the answer. And before I give my feedback, looking back, would love to hear your self-reflection, how you thought this mock interview went.
Sure. Thanks for asking. So I think on the whole, I liked my approach to it. I think, I felt pretty good about the argument I was building, and, that it all kind of made sense within the context of what's really important to YouTube, what's actually going to be a strategic threat and how do we understand that these are threats. I think when it came to the how would we mitigate this, I think I did a good job breaking down what YouTube needs to focus on, but I don't think I gave a very clear and specific answer for what that solution would actually be. I think I had good elements within there, but I could have wrapped it up more cohesively into a more clear product. And so I wasn't super happy with that. And then as far as the metrics go, I was rushing a little bit just to try and make it within time. But I think those actions that I broke out make a lot of sense. And I think the metrics are pretty straightforward for measuring it. I definitely could have gotten more nuanced, and I think there are more interesting ways to measure some of those that might tell us more about what users are actually doing. But I think as a first pass, all of those metrics will be useful for understanding whether our creator tools are doing what they're supposed to.
Yeah, they definitely passed like just my sanity test thinking about if they make sense or not. All in all, I do like the structure. So we started out by talking about strengths and weaknesses, and we talked about some concerns. So you brought up the concerns from competitors, but beyond, those concerns, social concerns, creator concerns, and then we talked about the biggest threat. So here you talked about Instagram. One thing that I think I would do is I would mention the For You page on TikTok. That's like the biggest part of TikTok. And I think even if, we assume that the interviewer would know what it is, it's still good to call it out. And since it's like kind of the crux of the argument as to why discovery is so easy on TikTok. So being able to call that out is good. And also talking about the social concerns when we talk about some of the political discourse, it might encourage people to go into alt-right rabbit holes. I think another concern that is very common in consumer tech today is addictiveness. I think that's something that is good to call out as well. And something that I like about your framework is that you have this tendency to go broad and then deep. So an example of this would be like in the metrics, where instead of just jumping straight into, I think the best metric is number of new videos, or I think the number of new active creators. I really like how you talk about the idea. You broadly talk about this idea of we want to see an explosion of content. We want to see less time being spent editing. We want to see a broader set of users, and then diving into how to quantify that idea. I think that's something that we can all learn from and apply. Just the one thing that I would do there, I know that we were short on time, but one thing I would do is after talking about these ideas, I would really pinpoint a North Star as to
Yeah.
like which one I would focus on. And it's hard, you know, to pinpoint one to, because this is a new product, right? You can't have just one metric that tells you how successful it is, but it would be useful.
Yeah, yeah, that's definitely a good point. I did intend to do that and then ran out of time, unfortunately.
Oh,
But
great.
it's super helpful. And, you know, uh, as much as, all of the whys and the reason behind it are important, and, that's definitely something that I dive into. At the end of the day, you need to make a specific choice. You need to have an answer to a question, and you need to be able to show why you prioritize, what all of those whys and understanding of the problem actually led to in terms of the actions you take as a PM.
Absolutely. And at the end of the day, for these interviews, as long as the solution sounds sane, the most important part is how you're getting to the solution, because obviously as the interviewee, you don't have all the insights that the PM has at the company at YouTube.